Welcome to another episode of the Reclaim Project podcast. In this episode, Kate Purcell joins us to share her journey of having to navigate a debilitating eating disorder in her formative years to being diagnosed with schizo-affective disorder in her 20s. In January 2025, Kate launched her book, Hope Inc., which details how she overcame the adversity she was faced with and forged a life filled with love, hope, passion and resilience. So get comfortable and enjoy Kate's journey.
So Kate, warm welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you. It took us a while to tee this up, just busy time of the year. Obviously for you, you've had a book launch. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, really great to have you on board.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk about your journey.
Yeah. Where do I start?
But we'll start at the beginning. So we'll start. Let's talk about growing up. I know you have a twin brother.
I do, yes.
Tell us what that was like.
Okay. So I'm not at all saying anything bad about him, just to be clear. Like he sort of struggles with the fact that I talk about this a little bit, but it was just my experience. So I'm just sharing my experience of how I felt at the time. But he was very much the opposite to me. He was very charismatic, very funny, very loud, outgoing. And I was the total opposite, very quiet, very shy, low self-esteem, introverted as a child. And because I wasn't like him, because I saw that he was very popular at school, for instance, and people just liked him. Like that, he's a very likable person. Still to this day, he has that same effect on people. But as a child, I was so opposite to him that I just thought that I was literally worthless because I wasn't like him and I wasn't popular. I struggled with anything I felt. I internalized all my struggles and all my pain.
Sorry, did you have the same friendship group?
No. Well, I mean, in primary school we sort of did, but go to high school we were complete opposites.
Right.
Like I had my little group, and he had his bigger popular group, and I struggled with that.
And you still struggled with the fact that he was more outgoing
He was likable, and I didn't get that from people because I was so introverted. So
Interesting.
I found it hard to make friends, and it was because I was so shy. But I literally felt worthless most of my childhood because I compared myself to him and I wanted to be like him, but I wasn't. So I really had a hard time processing that and just living with that truth.
Yeah. Did that impact your relationship with him? Did it?
We were never really close. We were close like early primary school when we were really little, really little before he sort of started developing his charisma and personality. I was a little bit more of the strong one when I went into year one. He was very scared about school and leaving mum and dad, and I remember being the brave one, but that was year one, year two. From year 3, 4, he started to develop this charismatic, funny personality, and I went the other way. So my struggles with that really led to problems down the track. And like I said, I had low self-esteem. And a lot of that was because I kept comparing myself to him. And you know what? Like I still have that. Even though I'm a lot different now than I was as a child, it's still, when we catch up as a family, it's still a challenge.
Interesting. Wow.
It's still a challenge to this day. But when I was a child, I had no way of navigating the situation. So I just internalized everything and I had a low self-esteem and low self-worth because of this comparison to him.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. Like the comparison, did you feel you needed to be like him, or did you try to be as outgoing as him?
I think I tried, but I always fell flat on my face.
Because
it wasn't natural.
It was inauthentic.
It's inauthentic, exactly.
Yeah.
That's just the way I was as a child. I was very quiet and shy.
Did that then lead to a withdrawal on your part? Or how did that manifest? Like, I know you mentioned your sense of self-worth was quite low.
Yes.
Your self-esteem was
quite low.
Quite low.
Yes.
How did that then manifest to your everyday life.
So it kind of led to my eating disorder. But let me start by saying I was always very critical of myself and my body, even from a very young age. Like when I was in year 3, I remember looking in the mirror and hating what I saw.
Do you know why?
No, it was just the way I was. I didn't like my bum, and I remember thinking, oh, my God, I hate my bum at the age of 8. And then by the time I got to year 7, I started dieting because my mum was on Weight Watchers, and I sort of started dieting and things like that to lose a little bit of weight, and I did. And then sort of petered off, and I was going along with just living life as best I could. And then with the transition to high school, with all this stuff with my brother and me not being popular, and, you know, I was rejected from a boy that I liked and things like that, it led to the beginnings of a very severe eating disorder. And that's not because of my brother, don't get me wrong, because of the comparison and how that impacted my self-worth and self-esteem.
Sure.
And then there was a little bit of teasing in year 7 and 8 from a girl at high school. And then there was at the very end of year 8 a rejection from a boy that I really liked. And I remember making a promise to myself. I said, I'm going to be thin because then people might like me, and boys in particular might like me if I'm thin. So I'm going to be thin. That was the decision that I made.
It's fascinating that kind of awareness around your weight manifested so early.
Yeah.
You know,
I was always very critical.
Was it in comparison to other friends or?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I remember, I'm not sure exactly when I was sort of 8 or 9, but being in year 6, 7, I used to very much compare myself to my social group. And I remember feeling really ugly and disgusting. And I always looked up to them and thought that they were really beautiful, and that's why they were more popular, and that's why they had boyfriends and things like that.
So that decision then to say, okay, I'm gonna be skinny.
Yeah.
Just remind me of the age. Was it?
That was at the end of year 8, so I just turned
around 13.
Around 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you started
dieting.
Just dieting.
Yes. Quite.
Any specific structure, or you were just eating less?
I just reduced significantly.
Yeah.
It probably would have been year 9 that I started counting grams of fat. I never really counted calories because I didn't know about calories at the time, but I counted grams of fat. And I remember things kind of kept going over the course of year 9, and I was still dieting. I remember my mum took me to a GP because I did lose a considerable amount of weight. I wasn't sort of anorexic at that stage, but I had lost weight, and my mum was a bit concerned. The GP kept tabs on my weight. Eventually, I told Mum I didn't want to do that anymore. But
do what?
Go to these GP appointments and be weighed and stuff. I kind of just said to her that it's not helpful or anything. But yeah, it was a very slow progression over year 9. And then I remember at the end of year 9, school holidays, Christmas holidays, I made up my mind that I was desperately not wanting to put on any weight over that holidays. And I kept on restricting even more. So I've restricted a lot over that year 9 towards year 10 Christmas holidays. And then by the beginning of year 10, I was very underweight, and soon after was diagnosed with anorexia and hospitalised and all that stuff.
Hospitalised.
Yes.
So during that period where you were that 13 to 15-year-old Kate, how were you feeling within yourself then? Because obviously you were losing an exorbitant amount of weight. Did that make you feel better about yourself?
No. It gave me something to focus on. It drowned out all the other crap in my life that I wasn't happy in my life at high school. I hated it. Focusing on weight loss and focusing on restricting food gave me something to focus on, and that was helpful in a sense, but it was the eating disorder starting to grab hold.
Right. And how did you see yourself? I know you were very aware of body image from a very young age. During that time, what did you see when you looked in the mirror?
I had no idea what I actually looked like.
Right.
The super critical part of myself did not let up. And even losing a considerable amount of weight, I continued to be critical. Not thin enough, not thin enough, not thin enough. So even when I whittled down to 29 kilos, and I remember thinking, I'm sort of okay with my bum now. I remember thinking that. But I was still critical. And with anorexia nervosa, it's never enough. It is literally never enough. Your desire to lose weight is all you have in terms of I had no self-esteem, no self-worth. The only thing I could focus on and all that I wanted was being thin. And that was it. That was what kept me going.
What was your social circle like?
So I'll just fill you in about what happened when I was first hospitalised. When I came out of hospital, I would go to school for a little while, but then it would be for a week or two and then I'd be back in hospital again because you'd put on the weight, you'd get tube fed at hospital. If you didn't eat enough, you'd have to get tube fed. And then you'd get to the it's not steady weight because I think my goal weight in hospital was 38 or 39. But once you got to that point, you'd go home and you'd just lose it again.
Right.
So I was back in hospital in a couple of weeks. I remember when I was first admitted, I had about 2 friends that came and visited me in hospital. But I was so out of it. You know, I was not in a normal headspace.
Yeah.
So it was hard for them to relate to me and me to them.
Of course.
So all my friends from high school, not that I had many, they dropped off.
Okay.
And the only friends that I had in that 2 years were the other girls in hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, so I completely left schooling behind me. It's actually quite an interesting one because a lot of people that I know that have experienced an eating disorder, they have a very perfectionistic streak and they're high achievers in their schooling and things like that. That was never the case for me. I always struggled with my schoolwork, and I think, I was perfectionistic in other ways, but not so much with schoolwork.
Right.
Eventually, I went over to Hollywood Clinic, which is a psychiatric clinic with an eating disorder program. And when you go there, you have to do that full time. So there was no school.
So this is 15 year old? Yeah, 15, 16.
So all of year 10 and pretty much all of year 11, I was in Princess Margaret.
Right.
10 admissions in total, I think. And then I went to Hollywood Clinic and I think I just turned 16 when I went to Hollywood Clinic. But I was there for 7 months straight. It was a straight admission, 7 months. All my life was not normal.
Yeah,
it was institutionalized.
Just
really.
to give us an idea, like if you can remember when you were right in the grips of anorexia, what would you eat in a day?
Okay, it depends whether I was in hospital or not.
Let's say at home.
At home. Well, I tried initially to eat minimal amounts of food. Like, it's really weird. People with eating disorders tend to do quite strange things with their food. Like, I remember I'd have Wheat Bix in the morning, but I'd have it with hot water instead of milk.
Okay.
And I'd have an apple, but I'd cut it into little tiny pieces. I might have a diet yogurt, and that might be frozen or something. And maybe a corn on the cob or something, maybe something like that. Again, very much getting the calories because at that point I was aware of calories. By the time I was hospitalised, I was aware of calories. So I was
still
reducing the calories and reducing the fat grams and just wanting to lose the weight as quickly as possible.
Got it. So still regular meals, but just
very minimal.
Yeah.
Very minimal. And I think towards the end, before I was going to be admitted again, I would cut out all food. So maybe like 3 days before my medical appointment, just in a desperate attempt to lose as much weight as possible, I would cut out everything. So I wouldn't eat. And sometimes for the last day or two, I wouldn't drink water. And that was just a desperate attempt to lose a significant amount of weight before being admitted. I was so bad at one point that I was worried about toothpaste being too many calories, and I cut out brushing my teeth. Yeah, I did read
that. During that 7 months, obviously it's an intensive program.
Yeah.
Obviously you gained the weight back to a healthy weight, I should say.
It was a healthy weight. So going through Princess Margaret, you had to get to your goal weight, which was probably, it was ridiculously low, still in the 30s. But when I went to Hollywood, I think I got up to 47. So I gained a fair bit of weight over that 7 months, which was traumatic, to be fair. It was traumatic. It took a lot of getting used to having weight on my body. And I was still tiny, but it took a long time to kind of process that and be okay with that. But Hollywood Clinic was a blessing. It got me to a stage of recovery. after 7 months, I mean, it was a hellish 7 months.
I can imagine.
And this book, there's a lot of diary entries in this book about, because I used to write a diary, so there's a lot of the diary entries in here about how I was feeling throughout that time. But it was a miracle. Like, it was legit a miracle. The fact that I got to the point where I was excited about life again, and I was really scared, like I was petrified, because I'd lived in this institutionalized life for a couple of years. So I was very scared about the idea of living a normal life again. And what if people don't like me? And what if, I just fall flat on my face? But the nurses at Hollywood Clinic and the other patients at Hollywood Clinic, and my doctor, but not so much. He was good, but just not overly helpful. But yeah, the nurses and the other patients, they really fed my soul and allowed me to heal over that 7-month period, because they were compassionate, they were kind. They made me feel like I deserved a happy life. And so my mindset changed. Probably would have taken about 3 months to kind of get to the point where I was ready to change. So maybe 3 months of that 7 months, I was still adamant that I didn't want to put on weight and recover. But that last 4 months, things started to change.
So that involved counselling as well?
Yes. So not so much counselling, but there were groups.
Group therapy,
So group therapy. So there would be things around like think, feel, act, like CBT stuff. There would be like cooking groups, and we'd go out for a meal sometimes.
Did you find that helpful? Did you find that?
It was terrifying at first. I remember when I first started to eat not those normal foods, at meal times, the nurse had to sit with me and kind of talk me through it. But yeah, the groups were helpful. But yeah, there was also like a body appreciation group where you look at body image and things like that.
Then what was the next step for you? How did you go about stepping into
a new life? Like, being social again. And it was overwhelming in terms of I was feeling ecstatic and excited. And I remember I felt like a newborn baby, because I'd been out of life for a few years, and I felt like I had a brand new soul. It was quite amazing. And I stepped into this life. I remember we had just moved house to get rid of all those bad memories, and had a new bedroom. I had new clothes. I was a new person. And then I started making friends with my old friends, and then some of my brother's friends, and I just stepped into life, and it just worked out. It was still hard in terms of my body image. I was still, I'm not really happy with the way I look.
Right.
But I started to be really excited for life.
Good. Were those insecurities around your brother, were they diminished? Or
they were quite diminished, and they have remained that way.
So you became
social.
developed quite a healthy social circle.
Yes, yeah. I was actually in a very healthy mindset, and
excellent.
And like I said, I felt like I had a brand new soul, and I was just ready to live life.
Which you did?
I did.
So that was the start of the club scene, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Quite quickly, I remember I made really good friends with one of my brother's friends who lived around the corner from us. And we became like two peas in a pod, and he helped me on my way 100%. And he introduced me to other people and other friends and things like that. But I remember quite quickly I was introduced to speed and ecstasy and dexamphetamines, and I started going raving, which was the introduction of drum and bass, which is a music that I still adore. But it was part of me spreading my wings and doing whatever it was that I wanted, because I'd missed out on so much life. I just wanted to experience life to the full. And you know what? It was good at first, because you end up being very close to people, and there's a lot of camaraderie and really good friendship bonds, and I loved that. It's something I'd always been looking for in my life, was that friendship and deep bond with other people. So I loved it. I just fell in love with it, and that was the way things were for about 2 years.
And your relationship with food during that time was
okay.
Was okay during that time.
When I left Hollywood, I was because I still see a dietitian. Even I'd still have to see the dietitian. There was a lot of work with a dietitian, but I had to eat 3 meals and 3 snacks every day, and that was regimented like anything because I needed to maintain the weight, not lose it.
Did you have an exercise program to go with that? Or?
No. I remember there was like a little bit of exercise when we were at Hollywood Clinic, but they never really discussed how exercise could fit in with the routine. Like I was never really into exercise. I did a little bit when I was quite severely anorexic. I could go on walks and things like that and go on a bike. But when I got better after Hollywood Clinic, I wasn't really exercising. And I don't think I probably wanted to because if I had have exercised, particularly if it was rigorous exercise, I would have had to eat more to kind of maintain the weight. So I was quite comfortable with what I was doing.
Yeah. So your party life, I guess we can call it, that extended into your 20s?
No.
No.
It was a couple of years when it was the drugs and raving and parties and stuff.
Right.
So I was 17, 18.
Okay.
And then things went pear-shaped there. And
okay. You want to talk about that?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Obviously, and I have looked into this a little bit, not so much recently, but when you start taking things like speed and ecstasy, they can have effects on your brain chemicals and things like that. And I found that after a couple of years, I think I started to get really depressed and I had a lot of anxiety that popped up, panic attacks and all sorts of stuff. And there's no doubt it was because of the drug taking. It wasn't like a daily thing at all. I was never an addict or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. It was just parties on the weekend,
sure.
recreational use. But yeah, it definitely affected my mental health after a couple of years. I ended up being very depressed and very anxious and had the panic attacks as well. I had one particular friendship with one of my guy friends, and we were, again, two peas in a pod, loving life, taking drugs in the weekend, things like that, getting drunk, all the rest of it, just having fun. But things fell apart with this person because of a bit of a weird lover's triangle with another friend that had asked me out. Without going into too much detail, my social circle started dissipating, and then I was so paranoid within the social circle that people didn't like me, and I started to get really bad social anxiety and social phobia because of this situation with the friendships falling apart. And all of these issues started coming back around, having a sense of identity and having a sense of self-worth. All of that started to unravel, and I ended up in a pretty yucky place.
So we're up to your what you termed as a yucky point at 19.
19, yeah.
What happened at 19?
Yeah, depression, social anxiety, social phobia, all of that stuff was quite severe. Then I went back on antidepressants because when I was at Hollywood Clinic with the eating disorder, they did put me on antidepressants and they actually helped. And I was on that for a little while, but eventually I took myself off it because I wasn't feeling like I needed it.
So you basically, would I be right in saying like you were still trying to forge a life, so you're basically on autopilot?
Yeah. I wasn't happy.
You weren't.
I was definitely not happy. So as soon as things started to unravel after the drug taking, I turned into a very unhappy person. I think I put on a bit of a mask with everyone, but I wasn't happy and I wasn't okay. Like I felt like something was off in terms of my mental health and I could not put my finger on it.
Did you talk to anyone about it?
Not really. I had a really good friend that I met while I was in hospital. I'm still friends with her now. And we'd sort of discussed a few things around the social anxiety because she was experiencing that as well. But I didn't really open up to anyone because, I had a psychiatrist, still the same psychiatrist that I see today. So I did try and talk to the psychiatrist about it and he tried to help me with different anti-anxiety, depressive drugs. But like I said, something was off. Something was very off. I actually tried to commit suicide because I was so distressed with the state I was in. Most people wouldn't have known it because I put on a bit of a front with everything. They wouldn't have known the distress and the depression that I was going through.
Yeah, just a complete despair. And
I was in despair and I was petrified because I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to feel okay because I felt like something was just off. And what I realize now, and it's still hard for me to articulate, I had a sense of disconnection disconnection from myself, from my feelings, and disconnection from others. So even though I went to, by the time I was 21, I had boyfriends, I was at uni, had a normal job. I was trying to forge this life.
So externally, it looked
like things were going okay. And when I had my 21st birthday party with my twin brother, it was amazing, even though I was going through this really hard time.
Wow. Sorry, can I just get back? When you say you attempted self-harm,
suicide.
What age was that?
19.
That was 19.
Yes.
Was that not a wake-up call then? Were you?
I didn't know what to do to help myself.
Right.
And neither did the doctors, because they kept on telling me, we'll get you better, we'll put you on the right medication, but something was off. And I realise this now, that I think there was a seed of psychosis that was planted quite early on. Right. And my experience of that was like this sense of disconnection with like I said, with my feelings, with myself, and with others. I was disconnected. It's a very hard thing for me to articulate and make sense of.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a seed of psychosis planted back in the drug taking.
Right.
That manifested itself in this disconnection. So after the anxiety and depression sort of dissipated, by the time I was 21, 22, I still had this sense of disconnection. So I was very unhappy still. Deep down, I was at war with something.
Yeah.
And I could not figure it out. And that was a tough place to be.
Yeah, and I hear you. It's quite a difficult thing to try and articulate, because, complete detachment and disconnection. So you could be in a room full of people and still feel completely isolated.
Oh, absolutely, I was, yeah.
And no one would know, because outwardly
I was looking okay.
You were okay.
Yeah.
So you could be completely isolated, but not only isolated from everyone outside, but, as you say, disconnected from
myself.
From yourself.
Yes.
And that really is quite a scary prospect. That's
100%.
Very, very scary place to be.
It was a very scary place to be, and I couldn't make sense of it. So there was a lot of time from when I was 18 to 23 that I was just distressed, even though outwardly, not so much 18, 19, because there was a few hospital admissions around then. Yeah. But by the time I was 21, 22, things looked normal, but I was not normal. I was not okay. And I couldn't talk about it because I didn't know how to. It's only in retrospect that I can look back and go, yeah, I was definitely disconnected. I had this detachment. But at the time, I had no idea. I was so in this space where I had no idea what the hell was going on, and I was petrified that I'd never be okay again. So it was quite a tough time.
Absolutely.
In essence, the anorexia was awful, but this was equally as awful. Even though life was still looking more normal, it was still pretty awful.
Yeah. Now, at the age of 24, something went wrong as well. So let's talk about that.
Yes. So it's weird because 23 onto 24, things were improving in terms of my mental health. I started meditating, and I had a really fantastic boyfriend for only about 3 months. And I had this amazing holiday over in Melbourne with some friends, which was just so much fun. And it was almost like things were, it was like the universe was giving me something really positive to hold on to before shit hit the fan. So as soon as I got back from Melbourne, things started to unravel in a very negative way.
And at this stage, the party drugs were all, that was gone.
way in the past. I sort of stopped that when I was 18 and never went back.
Never, okay.
So things started to unravel.
Yeah, what happened after Melbourne?
Probably, and it's quite extraordinary considering how awful the anorexia was and this disconnection was. This was probably 10,000 times harder than both of those things combined. It was very distressing, and it was the start of a psychotic episode, which led eventually to a manic episode, and then a mixed episode, and then full-blown schizophrenic symptoms.
Okay, so walk
you through that.
Yeah, when you say it started as a
psychotic episode.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I started to lose my sense of self. I didn't know who I was, and I was starting to get really into this, like these books by Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
And he'd talk about these concepts of no self and things like that. And that really spoke to me at the time, but it was unhealthy. I got really obsessed with these kind of ideas, and I totally lost my sense of who I was, and things just fell apart, and I ended up.
So this is even worse than the.
Well, what was coming was worse.
Yeah, but sorry, the feeling you're describing now, that it was that sense of detachment amplified.
Yeah.
Is that,
To an extent. I'll tell you a little bit more about what I was experiencing in the psychosis. I kind of got to the point where I thought I was becoming enlightened. Right? And then all these really deep spirituality, sort of spiritual stuff. I thought I was becoming enlightened, and so I started to throw in the towel everywhere. Like, I broke up with my boyfriend whom I adored because I felt like I needed to. And then I quit my job. I got out of uni. I literally would just stay at home and maybe meditate. And then eventually I lost my shit. I was so petrified at what was happening, and I didn't know what was happening. It was hard for me to understand what was going on. And I remember just curling up in my bed and crying, like bawling, because I was so distressed with what was happening and I didn't know what was happening. And then the most incredible thing happened, that in a bad way, not in a good way. But I kind of got this sense that, and this was really the beginning of the delusions, I thought that God had shunned me and I was in a living hell, literally. He'd taken my spirituality away, and I felt like I had no sacred space anymore. I felt like I had lost that, mainly because I didn't want enlightenment, that he took this sense of sacred away from me. It is nuts. For a year, and I'm not joking, a year, I was in this delusional state of thinking I was in hell.
Did you reach out again? I
didn't tell anyone what was going on because I felt like no one would understand. All my parents and my friends at the time, they just thought I was withdrawing from life and extraordinarily depressed. So when I ended up back in hospital where I tried to commit suicide again, they put me back on antidepressants. I knew that wouldn't help because it wasn't a depressive issue. It was a psychotic issue, but I didn't know at that time that I was psychotic. I had no idea.
Of course.
I thought it was the most real thing I've ever experienced. And to this day, I will still tell people it was so real that I believed what I believed. And I think for the first few months of that, I was hospitalised. Pretty much I'd go home for a couple of days and then I'd go back because I was just literally distressed and depressed. And you know what? More than depressed, it wasn't really depression. I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of my life because I thought that I'd lost it.
Right. And it was still just medication? There was no...
No, there was... I think my doctor
support?
No other support because I couldn't talk about it. There was no therapy that I could have because with psychosis, there's nothing that therapy can really do. You need antipsychotic medication to bring you back to good health. And I didn't have any of that because no one knew that I was psychotic because I didn't tell anyone what was going on. So I had a year period where I was delusional and very distressed. The last part of that year, and this was probably my saving grace, my friend, one of my best friends at the time, who was scared shitless. She didn't know where I was or what was going on, but she rocked up at my parents' house on Christmas Eve and she bought this bottle of wine from when we used to go down south that we used to love. She was like, Kate, you're coming with me to down south for New Year's. And I was at home for Christmas and I remember thinking, what do I do? Because, I'm experiencing all this stuff, but I don't want to disappoint her. And I think, what else am I going to do? Like, she's offered, so I'll just go. And my doctor was encouraging it. So we went down south. I had, bizarrely, a good time despite these delusions because no one can actually tell or any of this stuff that my beliefs and my delusions were there. they just thought that I was depressed. So
right.
I went down south, and then after that we caught up quite regularly, and things were not improving in terms of psychosis, but in terms of me having a life. I'd started to move forward, and eventually we moved down south into Pemberton in a little house in the forest, and we tried to forge a life there because she was not happy in Perth either. And I did that. I worked. I got a job at the local cafe, and she was at the school, and tried to maintain some kind of life. And the one thing that kept me going was I don't want to be a pain or cause my family any more grief than I have already. So I thought, okay, if we can go down to Pemberton, maybe I can somewhat create some kind of a life, even though I've got all these really hard delusions that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, and it's a common mistake people make, like relocating is going to improve things because
it didn't, but
because
it didn't improve my mental health. But
you just take it all with you,
yeah.
Don't you? So
there was something still healing about being in Pemberton. It's probably one of my favourite places.
It's beautiful,
and I still love going there.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was quite healing. And I remember at one point, because we were there for a few months, and then my best friend, she met someone and she moved in with him. So I had this little house in the forest by myself, and it actually worked out quite well because
magical, actually.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I started doing yoga, and I started doing some positive things. I started studying again and things like that. Even though I still had these delusions, I started to do positive things. I was cutting back on the drinking because we drank a lot. I think I stopped smoking because I was smoking for this whole period because I didn't care.
Yeah.
Things kind of went in a better direction, and I think my parents were a little bit more happy that things were, like I was starting to study natural medicine again and things like that.
Right.
And they knew that I was trying to make ends meet, and that made me happy. I was still unwell, but it made me happy knowing that they were okay.
All right. So
what happened next?
When did it come to a head? Like you said, it led to
a manic episode.
Episode, yeah.
Funnily enough, I think I was swimming at the swimming pool in Pemberton or something. I was doing something in nature. There was a nature aspect to it. I literally had almost what you could describe as a spiritual awakening. It was bizarre. Like, I felt like I had that sense of the sacred back, and I felt like I was connected to nature and connected to the universe and connected to other people and connected again. It was bizarre, this sense of connection, which I'd been searching for quite some time.
That's amazing, right?
It was amazing. Yeah. And I remember being so happy, and I was like, I think this is over. I think this delusional being in hell thing is over. And it was. And I moved back to Perth quite promptly, and I had an amazing couple of months, because anyone that's been manic before can probably tell you it's actually a very enjoyable experience, because you're high up, all
your senses
elated,
are heightened.
And you're elated.
Yeah.
You're literally elated, in this state of being elated and I was like that for a few months. At least 2 months I was just highly elated.
Was there anything that brought that on, that elicited that? Or I know you
weird.
did
And the
all
timing,
this meditation and all that kind of stuff. So.
And I started to look into astrology again and all these sorts of things that I was used to be into. And then all of a sudden one day I just got this really deep sense of connection. Wow. It was bizarre. And still I can't understand why these things happen or why it happened the way it did. But, I was really happy for a couple of months, and my parents were like, what the hell is with Kate? Like, she just seems so happy and great. I think my mum thought, something not right about this. But my dad was, like, very happy. He thought things were just great. After seeing me so distressed and depressed for so long, they thought, wow, Kate's really turned a corner. But Mum she had her reservations.
Medication still ongoing?
I wasn't on medication.
At all? Okay.
So that whole period of being psychotic, and even when I was manic, there was no medication because there was no diagnosis. There was no treatment for what, because I still didn't talk about what was going on.
I mean, so the antidepressants you were on.
They were gone.
They were long gone.
Yeah, they were long gone. Yeah.
So you're in this state of ecstasy,
mania,
basically. Yeah.
So which led to the eventual diagnosis of schizo-affective disorder, which is basically schizophrenia with a mood disorder attached.
Right.
If I hadn't have had that manic episode, I probably would have just been given the diagnosis of schizophrenia, but it's schizo-affective disorder because I had the mood disorder along with the schizophrenic symptoms.
So how did that come about? How did it jump from?
So it jumped from being very happy and manic, and I read this quite a while ago about how that tends to turn from manic into a mixed episode, which is where you start experiencing all these negative emotions. So it's like shit just unravels again. You get irritable, you get angry, you get depressed again and distressed. And
sort of like bipolar, like you're up there and then kind of?
Yeah, well, there is an aspect of bipolar in it. Like I said, that's why it's a schizo-affective disorder.
Right.
But yeah, it was like a mixed episode. I wasn't super depressed or anything, but there was depression a little bit, and then there was a lot of irritability and anger and anxiety and everything else in between. And that was really distressing. I didn't like that at all. And then the full-blown schizophrenic symptoms started to occur, which was not pleasant.
No. Well, what are they?
Okay, so I never had hallucinations. Like a lot of people talk about people with this kind of diagnosis as having voices or something, but I never experienced that. It was never anything like that. But I did have tactile hallucinations, which is when you feel things on your skin. I had that quite badly, and I think for a couple of months I would shower constantly because I felt like there was weird energy on my skin. It's bizarre. And then I'd dry myself with about 10,000 towels, and Mum was just like, what the hell are you doing? And at this point, my parents are like, she's mentally not well. But yeah, they thought that I had borderline personality disorder because I was so erratic.
Right.
It's never been a diagnosis for me, but that they were convinced there was something like that. I thought at the time there was something wrong physically because I was getting these tactile sensations.
Yeah.
I still didn't clue on to the fact that I was unwell mentally. I still didn't think that.
Wow.
My parents, whenever they'd bring it up, I went off my tree. I was like, I'm not mentally unwell. Like, it's my weird nervous system or something because I've got these tactile, things going on. But then things unraveled even further, and I was obsessed with spirituality and things like angels and I like all that stuff still, to be honest. But at the time, it was very unhelpful and unhealthy because it was to the extreme that I was so obsessed with like angel cards and psychics. And then I would feel like kind of like a feeling of being controlled by something and not knowing what it was.
Right.
Hard to explain and hard to even fathom. I started to see signs everywhere, and I
like
almost
numbers
and all these sorts of things. And I, to not go into it too much, but I like that kind of stuff now. But back in the day when I was going through all of this, it was very unhelpful and unhealthy because it was such this huge extreme.
So obsessive about it.
Obsessive about this stuff.
Yeah.
Eventually, I moved out of Mum and Dad's house because we were just volatile, and they kept telling me there was something wrong, and I didn't believe there was. I moved into my auntie's house. Oh my gosh, yeah. Eventually, I just started clawing onto it, and I remember thinking, something not right here. So I started Googling mental health stuff, and I started to think, okay, I can relate to all this stuff about manic episodes, and I can relate to this stuff about schizophrenic symptoms. And I remember calling my dad when I was at my auntie and uncle's house and going, I need help. I need help. Dad, I need help. Take me to hospital. So my parents took me back from my auntie's place. They got me all ready and they got me admitted to Perth Clinic. And my doctor at the time was away, but I saw some other doctor. Very quickly and easily diagnosed me with schizo-affective disorder and put me on medication. And straight away, I felt 10 times better from that first dose of antipsychotic medication. I started to get in touch with Kate again and the feelings that I had, and I started crying, and I remember just connecting with myself again. It was weird.
How did you feel with that initial diagnosis when they said, okay, this is what it is?
I already kind of got to the conclusion that I probably did have that.
Yeah, because you did some research.
I did a bit of research and stuff, so I wasn't surprised.
Okay.
But I was petrified of going on medication, antipsychotic medication. I was petrified. For the first week that I was there, I literally refused. And then my doctor was like, you have to just try at least this mild antipsychotic. And because I had such good results, I started another antipsychotic medication, and it just helped 110,000%.
Yeah.
And I'm still on that medication today. And that was in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 14 years ago. And since that time, I've been on my recovery journey.
Yeah.
And
that's just fascinating
it's
how that reconnection to yourself was almost instantaneous.
Instantaneous almost. It was maybe, I don't even know how that works, but I swear to God, the first time I took this antipsychotic medication, I just started to feel things that I hadn't felt in a long time. And I started to know, okay, this is me. This is Kate. I'm back. I've got this connection to myself. I've got this connection to others that I didn't have so long ago. So I went on this journey from where I was 13 to 26, the 13 years of pretty consistent bullshit. It was a hard slog, but I literally have to pinch myself sometimes because I'm like, things are so good. How is this possible?
Yeah, I was going to say, look at you now.
I just have to pinch myself sometimes. There's nothing in my life that is wrong. Everything's great, and I've never been happier. And really, I've been in that state since 2012. The first year of my recovery was very challenging, trying to get a job again and overcoming the stigma around my diagnosis was difficult. So 2011 was a bit of a write-off, but then by the time it got to 2012, things started to happen with friends, and then I met my ex-fiance in June 2012, and life just happened. Turned into a social butterfly, and I'm still that now. But so since 2012, things have been pretty amazing. And I have been on some difficult journeys with leaving my ex-fiance and then finding new love with my current partner. So being single for a while there was kind of, a challenge. But
challenging as in that kind of self-worth, self-doubt?
Not so much. I think
crept in? No?
I think I've worked so much on the self-love, self-worth stuff. It's not an issue for me anymore.
Yeah. And
even when I was single, I was still very confident and happy with who I was.
Yeah.
But being single is a difficult thing. Meeting people online, things like that. That was a real challenge because I was trying to make Kate's life the best it could be as a single gal.
Now, you did mention before, do you think, you may not be able to answer this, do you think that your diagnosis or not the psychosis, the psychosis, do you think the drug use during your late teens may have unlocked
I do.
some of those imbalances?
I do. And
because you did mention earlier in the chat that you started feeling
like a seed of psychosis. There was something wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was so distressing not being able to articulate that. I could never understand what the hell was what was going on. But I think there was a seed of psychosis planted with the drug use. I actually have a very interesting stance on that because I actually don't regret it because I think things played out the way they needed to.
It has a habit of doing that.
Yeah.
We don't understand it while we're in the midst of it. It just seems like an absolute shit show. But,
and it was.
Yeah.
But I needed that for my own growth.
Yeah.
And my own sense of who I was. That time with all those friends and all that music and drugs, I don't regret it. And you know what? If I had kids, my partner and I were not going to have kids. But if I was to have a kid, I would be fretting about drug use because I don't like it generally, but I don't regret doing it at that time.
I understand.
Yeah.
It makes sense, But when you decided to write the book and when you started the process of writing the book, how did you feel revisiting all those memories? And
it was confronting, but also cathartic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that makes sense.
For me now, writing is so cathartic. I can write all day and it fills my cup. It 110% fills my cup. I feel so nourished by writing.
Are you at a point now where you've addressed all those shadows, like the self-worth shadow with regards to your brother, then the nutrition, the self-image, the body image, then all those things?
I've never been happier in terms of my general mindset, in terms of feeling worthy and feeling happy with myself and feeling like I can connect with my identity and all these sorts of things. I guess there's a little bit still around the body image stuff, because when I went on antipsychotic medication, it's very common to put on weight with antipsychotic medication. And my medication is no different. So I did put on some weight, and it was distressing and traumatic. So I had to deal with that the whole time going through this recovery journey, was navigating that. And I have to work really friggin' hard to stay at a healthy, good weight. I exercise a lot, I eat really well and things like that. I still enjoy myself a lot on the weekends and things like that, but I still struggle with that issue of, the medication makes me put on weight like at the drop of a hat. But in terms of the way I actually just carry myself on a day-to-day basis, it's almost like looking at night and day in terms of the way I was and the way I am now. I'm very confident, I'm very happy, I'm bubbly, I'm social, I'm resilient, I'm courageous, all these really good things. And, I put that all down to this recovery journey over the past 14 years has strengthened me. I could go through anything now and be okay.
Look, I think your story will carry so much weight for anyone who's resonated with either part of the story you've just articulated or all of it.
Yeah,
that, when you're in the thick of it, it's... And
I never thought I'd be okay, and I don't think my parents ever thought that I would be.
Absolutely. I mean, you attempted suicide twice.
Yeah, exactly.
I just love the title of your book, Hope Inc., because when you're in the thick of it, everything seems hopeless.
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of time that I had no hope, a lot of time. And it's a very dangerous place to be when you have no hope.
Absolutely.
But I didn't just write this for the people that are going through it. It's also for the families and loved ones of people going through it as well. Because they
it's
need
very
hope.
difficult for them too.
And they need hope as well.
Yeah.
Because, as someone that's going through a really hopeless patch, your loved ones need to be the ones that hold the hope for you. You need them to believe in your recovery as well. Yeah. And that can rub off to the person who's suffering.
Yeah.
So there is a section in the book that is written specifically from loved ones that my mum and dad wrote a little bit in the book.
Oh, fantastic.
And also there's a section for loved ones written by myself directly to loved ones, and why it's so important to not neglect yourself if you're supporting someone going through this, because you need strength and resilience yourself.
You too.
So there's a whole section about that in there as well.
You are really a true inspiration. You really are. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad you put pen to paper and brought that out. I take my hat off to you.
Oh, thank you.
So, look, thanks again for your time.
No worries.
Thanks so much
it was
for
a pleasure.
coming. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. It was great. Thank you.